holidays with your family. When you guys were younger, how did you spend your holidays together and with your families? Like, what are your memories of how holidays went?
First of all, the only holiday we ever celebrated was, I think, was Passover. That is the holiday that we celebrate. Nothing else. Not even birthdays. There were never any birthday parties. Never had a birthday party, did you?
No.
Never got a birthday gift?
Never knew anyone that had a birthday party.
Never went to one.
You believe that? Year after year, kids.
Your mother and Uncle Curdy are the first people in our family, the first generation, to have birthday parties.
How'd you decide to have a birthday party if that was never done?
Because the Americans did it.
Oh, I see.
And they had been invited to other downstairs. We had them all downstairs in the basement here. I made some paper mache stuff that looked like logs and fire, and they all sat down around it, and every kid got a handkerchief, one of these big, red handkerchiefs.
Like a hobo on a stick?
On a stick, and their lunches was wrapped in there.
That's so cute.
And they were asked to come dressed as hobos.
That's so cute.
And on one I rented a professional clown outfit. Took me a couple hours with the makeup and all that, and I was a clown.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we went all out
really?
because we had never had any, so we went all out for your mother and
And
father.
some with fire hats, fireman
Kurt.
hats. We did a lot of beautiful parties, which we have on the video.
We have some of them.
You'll see.
Wow. So Passover in your family?
Was, I don't know about you, what did you?
Passover was about the only thing.
It was the only holiday that we celebrated.
Pesach.
And what was that like? Was it extended family or just everyone that you saw all the time anyways?
It was our family and my aunts and uncles and cousins and my bubby used to make it, maybe like 20 people, 25 people. Did your bubby make it?
My bubby made it too.
So did you ever have any family get-togethers besides that?
We were always together because we lived next door to them.
So that wasn't like a...
No,
we were always together.
They lived across the street, across the alley, next door, upstairs. We were always together.
Okay.
And we used to go away for on weekends, we used to go for a picnic together. One of Mutti's father had a truck. He used to sell watermelons or Christmas trees or whatever he could. And he'd put benches and blankets on the truck, and we'd go to the Milwaukee woods and we'd have picnics. So we were always together. Very close.
Either one of you can answer this first. Are there any relatives that you remember when you were younger that really stood out, that were really funny or unusual, or any stories about any relatives that...
Well, yours, Galitza was...
We're talking about your family.
Oh, my family?
No, either one of you.
It's my family. No, he's talking about
I had no
them.
one funny in my family.
Nobody
Don't
funny?
you have any memorable aunts or uncles? Actually, your grandmother was
Or
very
any cousins or
memorable.
anything?
Oh, memorable.
Your Aunt Minnie was very good to you.
Yes, they were all very good to me. My uncles, I lived with them for 6 years, practically.
You lived with your uncles?
I was always at the grandmother's house.
Uh-huh.
I was always there.
He was always there so much that he slept there.
Yeah,
and
I was there.
There wasn't
They
enough
just
food to
wouldn't
eat,
let
so
me go.
Yeah.
and they loved him.
They
Yeah.
wouldn't let me go.
They really adored him, and he enjoyed it. He used to sleep with his bubby.
I always used to say I want to sleep with the naked bubby.
That means
With the naked bubby.
yeah, Debbie didn't wear very much when she went to sleep. So you always going to sleep with a naked bubby.
I guess you didn't wear much. Maybe
funny.
that's why I never left the house either.
And most of his aunts and uncles were older, and they got married late in life.
Uh-huh.
And he was like the little mascot of the family. They all brought him gifts, little gifts and things.
Uh-huh.
Not my brother, just we're a year apart, but me.
That's funny.
Loved
He
me.
was the one. That's why he doesn't remember Phil too much, because he wasn't at home very much.
Yeah.
Always pet the bubby.
The naked Buffy.
But
Bubby
naked
and
bubby.
Zadie.
Did you have any strange or...
The whole family was very strange. They were a lot of fun, but they were survivors, and I may have mentioned it too. Everyone had a nickname, and they were all very strong people. Everyone was an individualist, and if you didn't measure up, out.
Yeah.
So we had my uncle, my dad. My mother's family was not here. This was all my father's family. My father had brothers and several brothers, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And we all lived, the only brother that didn't live near us was the oldest brother, Jake. He lived further away, and he was very successful. He had a big bakery. He did not know how to read and write. He used to sign his checks with an X. And because he didn't know how to make deposits, he kept his money in a trunk. He had thousands and thousands of dollars in this trunk at home. And he used to pay everything in cash and put the money in the trunk. Very, very rich man. He was, at that time, was the richest man in the family. But he lived further away because he lived near his bakery, which was far away. Far away. It was in Rogers Park.
Is there any relative of yours that you remembered you kind of looked up to as a mentor, that someone that you really thought was pretty neat?
No. All of them were my Aunt Tilly was fun. Each one had their own little shtick, and I used to enjoy them.
Yeah.
But none of them were educated. And when I say none of them were educated, I mean just that. Blanco education. Most of them could not read or write. They finally learned how to speak English. They were peasants, came from Europe and had no class. They were crude and rude and boisterous and earthy and just a lot of fun if they weren't tearing you apart, if you were their equal. I would have liked someone to have been a mentor to help me decide to go to college, to tell me what there was available to me. There was no one. And even in school there was no one. They had, they told you either became a secretary or a social worker or a housewife, and, or sales girl. That was it for women. So there was nobody to really guide me. No, there was no one in our family who was educated enough to become a mentor.
What about you, Pop? Anybody in your family that you wanted to that you really looked up to?
No one that I can think of.
Really?
Did you think your cousin was pretty neat? Redhead. The one, your mother's brother.
You mean my father's brother?
No, your mother's brother. They never had any children. And then they went to California, they lived in San Diego. Yeah.
No one.
No.
Okay. When you were younger,
Excuse me, I just want to say,
okay.
both of us came from what in Yiddish we call schmutz.
Dirt.
We came from dirt, yeah. I mean, the families were wonderful, but
Yeah.
they were earthy.
Yeah.
They were dirt.
Nothing spectacular.
They were survivors. They made a living. They earned their bread. None of them, they didn't go to jail. They were good, honest, hard-working peasants.
They were lucky. Didn't get
Did you have any
caught.
crooks in the family? Anybody ever got in trouble, or?
My mother tells me that there was a horse thief somewhere in our family
But
back
they
in Europe.
hung him.
No, I don't know. She said she thinks there was one, but they didn't talk about him too much.
Uh-huh.
But she's pretty sure that there was a horse thief, and that was the lowest type of life that because
Yeah.
to steal somebody's horse, you were stealing their bread and their everything.
Uh-huh.
We did have one couple in iron and steel. She ironed and he stole.
That's a joke.
Is that what it is?
Very honest, very straightforward. Didn't know enough to steal. Didn't know enough to embezzle. Didn't know enough to do
Yeah.
anything except work very hard for a living.
Very hard.
And make
yeah,
a day's bread and butter for their family. That's it.
Uh-huh.
honest people.
That's good. Okay, today, you have kids that have video games and all that kind of stuff and television. When you were little, what kind of games did you play? What did you do to amuse yourselves?
A lot of fun. A lot of games, simple games.
What's interesting is that Papa and I we didn't know each other, but we
Uh-huh.
did exactly the same thing. I mean, I tell them about it's as if we were in the house together doing these things at the same time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Shooting marbles outside, hours all day. Or we'd take a broom, cut off a piece or stick, make point on the end, then take a little piece and make a point at either
Peg.
end. A peg, and hit one end and would fly up and hit it with the stick. Hours.
A peg stick.
Uh-huh.
And then we used to have a ball, and if there was a stair, we used to play pinners. Hit the ball
Oh, yeah.
on the edge of the...
To see if it catches the sharp point and,
And then
it would
bounce,
come
it would
back.
bounce back, and it was really... And jump rope for the girls. And we used to take a shoebox and put holes in the lid and stand it up and throw either a ball or a marble. And we used to mark them like 5 points, 10 points. We had no formal games. There wasn't one in our family. I mean, nobody had a game. And I had a doll. I finally got a doll.
Yeah.
Maury took apart, and there's the little doll. 60 years later.
You want to get it? Is this the same doll?
No.
No, Maury
He took it apart, and I've been nudging him.
All
So he
these
bought
years,
this for
60
me.
years, he just got it as
So
doll.
he writes on here, 60 years later, but so what? I don't want to hear about it. So this is my little doll. He took it apart because when you bent it, it said Mama, and he wanted to see why it said Mama. And it closed its eyes, and he wanted to see why it closed its eyes. But once he investigated those two things, the doll was
Then it
mutilated.
A close-up there.
Yeah, I got it.
So this is 60 years late, but so what? I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Didn't you have a pair of roller skates too?
Yeah, we had
Yes.
one pair of roller skates, and we played roller skating with it. Maury sometimes borrowed it, sometimes I did. Now, Papa didn't even have that.
But the thrilling thing was to take a 2x4 and an orange box and take one skate,
I have it
take
skated.
it apart, put front and rear under this 2x4 and 2 tin cans for headlights and 2 pieces of wood like a steering wheel and go out on the street with one leg and a scooter.
Like a skateboard?
Oh, that was the
It
most
was
exciting
it
thing.
looked like a cart.
Like owning
like
your
you went-
own car. It was something. Put candles in the front and light them. Oh, we had more fun with that.
And then we'd play street games, Relivio, where we'd be out in the street. There was very little car traffic, so we'd actually play in the street. And there'd be a group. It's like King of the Hill, you know. There were a lot of kids around. There were always kids around because nobody went anywhere. Nobody had cars. Nobody had money. So there was always kids around. And we used to play in the street or we used to play under the street lamp. Everybody would meet under the street lamp.
So didn't you tell me stories about how you used to, if it was hot, you used to go sleep out in the bowl?
Oh,
What was that about?
Yeah. Down by the Field Museum.
Yeah.
The art, Field
The
Museum.
museum. No, it was the Museum of Science and Industry.
Museum of Science and Industry.
There's a parking lot there now, but the funny thing is they are turning it back into it was a grassy bowl, and they are now putting the cars underneath, and they're turning that after 30 years. They're turning it back into a grassy bowl.
At the
We
Science
used to
and
sleep
Industry?
there at night. My mother would bring a big pot of food, wrapped in towels, and blankets. It was so hot in the house. You
No
couldn't
air
sleep.
conditioning.
And we'd sleep by the lake there. It was so cool. And then my father would take us home about 3, 4 in the morning and deposit us, and he'd go to work as a milkman.
Now, were you ever worried about crime or anything like that?
There wasn't any.
And we used to
No
sleep in
problem.
Douglas Park. Do you ever hear of Douglas Park? Try walking in Douglas Park during the day now. We used to sleep there at night.
Yeah.
And we used to sleep on our back porch.
No problems.
Never. Nobody bothered anybody.
Do you have any idea why you think that crime is so terrible now? Do you have any theory about that?
I think there's more people, there's more crime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just overcrowding?
So you hear more crime because there's more people to have more crime. Those days there's less people, so you hear 1 or 2 now and then.
Yeah.
Now it's...
I think another reason was that in our neighborhood, nobody had anything.
Nothing to steal.
But we had respect for each other. The neighbors would call each other Mrs. and Mr. They'd know each other for years. Mrs. Cohn, Mrs. Hanyanko, Mr. Davis. Everybody had respect for everybody else. It was the thing to do. And out of respect, you didn't. And if your kid did anything wrong, if a neighbor complained, you beat up the kid before you got the whole story. Because they're not supposed to do that. It's not nice for a Jewish boy or a Jewish girl to get into trouble. We don't do that. So there was a lot of parental control. A lot of parental control.
And also fear of the police.
Yeah.
See, today, policemen then,
Fear of teachers.
and a teacher,
Fear of authority.
you're not kidding.
Yeah.
Well,
I
our
don't
parents
care how
still
big
had
or
it.
who you were,
Yeah.
I'm the police or a teacher.
Oh my God, were we frightened of
Yeah.
the police. I mean,
Yeah. You stay
never, don't
far.
do anything wrong
Only
because
one cop controlled miles, just walking around, and you see him. That's it.
that's it.
If you have anything in mind, you forget about it.
A great deal of fear and respect for
Yeah.
authority of any kind. Teachers had a much easier time of it because the kids at school, yes, Miss
Oh,
Ryan,
no
no,
problem.
Miss Ryan,
No problem.
sat still, raised
Yeah.
their hand. I mean, you sat with your hands like this, you didn't go
Afraid to
anywhere.
go to the washroom.
Pee in your pants before you'd ask her.
Yeah, teachers.
Was-
Even if they could hit you, no one would say it. You deserve it.
I don't know if it's
Yeah.
good or bad, but life was a lot more, well, it was more conforming, but you knew where you were going and it was safe and it was comfortable.
And the father was the boss, boy. I mean, you never talk back to your father. That's all you need.
Even in our house, I learned that from my parents. We had a chair in the living room. You can ask Kurt about it.
Uh-huh.
That chair, anybody could sit in it. But when it was time for Dad to come home,
Uh-huh.
for Papa to come home, everybody got off because that was Daddy's
I
chair.
remember that chair.
That was Daddy's chair. That was
Yeah.
his chair. Nobody sat in it because that was his.
Uh-huh.
That was the respect that we showed him, you know. And dinner was always on the table. I think a key word is respect. A lot
Uh-huh.
more respect for everybody in your family and outside of your family than there is now. Now people call up on the phone. Is Maury there? They don't even know who he is. By the way, they're our first name. And they'll call me, they say, who is this? I say, it's Shirley Mankoff. They'll ask me, Shirley, you don't know me. My name's Mrs. Mankoff.
You said it?
I told you. Or my girl will be on the phone with you in just a minute. Your girl is like 70 years old. Give her respect and due. Call her
Grandma
your
straight
assistant
to
or
the
your
mouth.
associate. Don't call her your girl.
Yeah.
I used to get pretty angry with these
And
people.
Yeah.
they listen because they know that it's right.
Yeah.
But there's a lack of respect in general for people nowadays.
That's different.
Respect for life,
Mm-hmm.
much less for people. Anyway.
Okay. Next question. As far as is the country like with World War II, like what are memories that you have of any
lot.
fear
We could go on for days just on that
or
one
give
subject.
a little
We were talking about that with Jory today. We were saying it was the best of times and the worst of times. It's like a tale of two cities.
yeah.
The country was together like it had never been before. And everybody, we had a great common cause. And we'd save from
What did you feel like the cause was? The major cause?
absolute and complete getting rid of Germany because it was survival. If we didn't get rid of Germany and then the Japanese, we would be speaking German and Japanese.
Especially as Jews. So
Yeah.
we're no part of the...
See, World War
Any
I was the war to end all wars. Is how it was billed, so to speak. That didn't happen, obviously. But World War II, they attacked all the countries in Europe, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Russia, France, and all these. And then they were going to take over England. And England was our ally. Those English, you have to admire them. They withstood bombings of London. Very few people could have withstood it. What happened to the French?
The French immediately gave up.
2 days,
Yeah.
the war was over. The
Big
Italians,
French. The Italians, they give up.
they gave up in 1 day.
Before they even showed up.
I mean, yeah, absolutely, you know.
But
But those British
people are
and the
tough.
bombings, they went down underground in the tubes.
The
And,
women, the men, they're tough.
and they gave us, they died in huge numbers to give us time for the United States to build their airplanes and their army, our army and our weapons in order to give us that time so that we could get into the war. And the Russians gave up millions of
20
lives.
million Russians killed. 20 million. You imagine what kind of army they have. You can put 20 million people in the field.
In the siege of Leningrad,
Biggest army, bigger than China.
the siege of Leningrad, the Germans had them surrounded in Leningrad in the winter. No food could go out. Nothing could come in or go out.
Starved plenty of people.
People died by the millions on the streets from starvation in Leningrad.
Besides
But meantime,
this-
they were keeping Germany busy. They
Yeah.
were on so many fronts that we finally were able to come in and beat the hell out of it.
So what was the morale at home like? How did it affect your
It was
lives?
very high. It was,
You know,
we were all in this together. If you chew gum, you'd take the silver wrapping or from cigarettes, and you'd wrap it up into balls, and there was a special place where you could deposit because they needed that metal. Grease, any grease that you had in your home, from any cooking,
fat
Yeah.
from the cooking.
you put, and those days
everything.
were a lot of fat. You put it into a coffee tin.
Yeah.
When it got full, you brought it to a special place where they used it for making war material.
Couldn't get sugar, couldn't get eggs.
Everything was-
couldn't ration.
It was ration
They went to
books.
the army and the war effort.
But everyone was for that though.
Everybody did.
There was
Victory
nobody.
gardens, everyone
Yeah.
had a garden everywhere to get
Planting their own
vegetables
food. Yeah.
because everything was watched.
You had a ration book. So much sugar was allowed for each person in the family, so much flour, so much gasoline, and nobody complained. There was a black market on some of this
Yeah.
stuff. There's always somebody making a buck off of it.
Yeah.
But nobody complained. It was the best of times, the
But
worst
they-
of times. People were dying, but we have never, ever been so united. I don't believe we ever will again, because we were more simple in those
Yeah.
days. We're too sophisticated now. We're too worldly. Whatever they told us. President Roosevelt used to come on the radio. Remember, he used to have the fireside chats. We're doing this, we're doing that. Yay! We're not going to do this, we're not
So
going to do
nobody
that.
ripped on the president or
Yay.
anything?
He was next to God.
How do you feel about the
President
president? What do you
Roosevelt,
think?
you mean?
Yeah.
He was next to God.
Yeah, he was-
Yeah.
I saw him in person once. He came to Soldiers Field. And they had a big ramp built in the center of Soldiers Field. He came in a car. The interesting thing is, very few people, maybe a couple of dozen people, knew that he had polio. The rest of us did
The
not
nation
know.
did not know.
Nobody knew he had polio.
16 years in office. And I never knew
Until
until I
he
saw it
died.
on by
Yeah.
till he died.
Until he died, then it was because
Well,
he
those
died
were
in
his
a,
instructions to the press.
and the
Never
press
showed
never showed him
No.
Yeah.
in a wheelchair or
Never,
with braces.
never below.
Yeah. So how did he get into Soldier Field?
His son
In a car.
the
They
photograph
drove him
of the
in
car.
and drove him up
Yeah.
on the ramp, and he sat there and, with his cigarette and his hat and
Yeah.
waved to everybody. I get the chills now, thinking, I would say that he must have gotten a 20-minute standing ovation
Oh,
from
he
people there.
was
I mean, we were dying. Our arms were so simple. We had to show him how much we loved him and how much we honored and respected him for what he was doing to bring the country together and winning the war. He dealt with all the main heads of government. He was the leader of the free
Like
world.
Churchill.
He
Churchill,
and Churchill
Roosevelt.
were the two leaders of the free world.
And then what we did, we didn't take any chances, is intern all the Japanese Americans.
It wasn't very nice at all.
Well, we took no chances. If you have a Japanese going to your school, you'd be in the detention. The
Which was
whole
awful.
family was put away. There wasn't
were
a Japanese
third or
person
fourth generation.
born in America.
They put him in detention camps
That's
because they were
something.
afraid. We didn't
We did thought of internal problems.
have time to sort out all
Yeah.
the spies and non-spies, and we were so afraid that that we'd lose. So Germans were interned
Yeah.
and Japanese were interned.
Do you think that was right?
Of course not. And they've been apologized and they've been given money.
Compensated? Yeah.
And there's no question it was wrong, but at the time, it was
a fear.
it was a war.
And who knows?
all things are fair in love and war. It was just something that
millions
they didn't
of-
ask us,
Yeah.
should it be done? What do you think?
No,
Things
they
were
didn't.
just done because they
Yeah.
had to be done. And they were afraid that there were going to be Japanese spies, and Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor here, and the Germans were over
So
there.
really
We were
upset
caught in
with the
between.
Japanese.
We
Yeah.
didn't have an army, we didn't have a navy, we didn't have an air force, and we were so afraid that, well, let's get rid of any possible problems and then go to work. And that's
Sure,
what
they might be happy to see their people here. We couldn't take chances.
Yeah.
The whole millions put into camp immediately,
was not
taken
good.
from their house, and in you go.
So do you think that Roosevelt took care of everything in the right manner? I mean, because I heard that he didn't let certain amount of Jews in from.
Yes, but we didn't know that.
We didn't know that at the time.
No. And if we knew that, he would have told us that he was right. We would have believed him.
Yeah.
He could do no wrong.
Yeah,
He was 1,000 times larger than life.
Hmm.
He was President Roosevelt. Oh.
How do you compare him to Clinton? What do you think
Hey,
Clinton's?
It's like comparing God to
It's like
to a
comparing
little, you know.
or Lincoln to Clinton or Washington to Clinton. I mean, that
Yeah.
was Roosevelt. The
Roosevelt,
Lincoln and the
but-
Do you
Washington.
think Clinton has any good qualities though?
See, with presidents, it's like Truman.
Yeah.
You don't know till after they're dead, till later on, who knew how great Truman was.
Truman was a great
He
president.
was the greatest.
Why do you think Truman was so great?
He went
lot of
into
things he
a
did.
situation that was very bad, and he did the best he could.
He
with
ended
it.
the war. That's good
He
enough.
took a lot of things on his shoulder that
Just
made him
ending the
unpopular,
war.
and he knew it.
Yeah.
But his aim was to save thousands and thousands of American lives, and he did.
What year was Truman president?
Truman was
Truman,
president
1943, 1945.
Mhm.
The end
when
of the war
Roosevelt
era.
died,
Yeah.
and he was vice president. Nobody ever heard of him.
Uh-huh.
He was a haberdasher. It's amazing how he ever got into office at all.
He wasn't educated, was he?
Yeah,
Just
I
from
think
out of the
I don't think he had
blue.
college.
I think he had some college.
I don't think he had any college.
I don't know. He was.
I don't know how. I don't know where he
I
came
don't know
from.
where he
Yeah.
came
I mean, I know where he came from,
Yeah.
but I don't
He beat a
know.
man like Dewey. The
Yeah.
Tribune already said Dewey is president. They went ahead and published the headline.
Yeah.
And Truman made
Dewey
it.
was a big man.
Dewey was.
He had taken care of all the gangsters, and he was a major
He
hero.
was a major.
And that Tribune had Dewey,
Boy, were they
Dewey won.
mortified when they
Yeah.
found
and
out
they had to throw
printed.
that out. Dewey
Boy, I wish
lost.
I had have kept that paper.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy,
That was really something.
so
So
Truman.
Anyway.
didn't you work for the war effort?
Yes, I was going to college at that time, but all the boys that I knew were going into service. All my relatives, my cousins, everybody was in the service. They're either drafted or they went in on their own. And I was not about to just sit safely in school, so I was going to join the Marines. And I was all ready to sign up. And I worked at this office downtown, Angelica Jacket Company, and I'd given them my notice because I was going to take a week off and then join them. So one of the girls, in fact the girl who had my job, whose job I got, came in to visit, and she was a Marine. And I was so thrilled. They brought her over to me and said, you know, she's joining the Marines. I said, sure. And I said, could you tell me a little bit about life in the Marines? And she told me that they didn't have partitions for toilets, for bathrooms. And both of us had grown up in a very conservative, I mean, you know, you didn't take a bath where your mother could see you, you know, everything
Yeah.
was, and I didn't even know what a period was until I
Yeah.
was,
Except for sleeping with your naked grandmother.
Yeah, that was early. I had an early start.
she told me that. I said, no, I can't join, I can't live like that.
Yeah.
So I quit anyway, and I went to work in a defense plant. They wouldn't hire me at first because they used to have signs on factories in Cicero. No Jews,
No,
nigger,
they didn't
no
say-
Jews.
No restricted.
They're restricted, but then they no Jews, niggers, or
Dogs.
dogs allowed. And this one didn't have restricted on it because when the war effort was on, they were told don't do that. Not because it was morally
They
right
needed
or
it.
wrong, but because they needed everything.
Yeah.
So I stood in line with people to sign up, and there were these two girls in front of me.
Uh-huh.
And we got to talking because we were standing there for a long time. And they went in, and they came out, and they said, we got the job, we got the
Yeah.
job. I said, wonderful. You know, I was sure I would get it too. I was
Yeah.
smarter and more educated than them.
Yeah.
Come in there, I fill out the form. There's a place there for your religion, which they can't do now.
Right.
And it was like the lower right-hand side, and there were two people looking at these, and the one man looked at it, and he bent over to the other guy, and he pointed right there. So they said, no, we're full, thank you. Well, I went out, and the people, meantime, behind me, I stood there for a few minutes. They came out, they were hired. So I went to another plant, and they wanted me in the office. I said, no, I want to be in the line, the defense line. So they gave me the job. And I made parts for anti-aircraft shells.
Uh-huh.
And I used to work evenings, and during the day I used to go with the girls horseback riding until 3 o'clock, and then I used to go to work.
Did any of your friends do it with you, or did you just do it on your own? Did any of your friends do that? They worked at plants?
No, They stayed in their jobs.
Uh-huh.
I was kind of a maverick in my day.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little rebellious. I was a little more. I was probably a very early form of feminist.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go for this kind of stuff. And I didn't like the idea that blacks were not equal. Just to diverse for a moment. When I was about 13 years old, my dad took me, 13 or 14, took me to a union meeting. And this union had communistic tendencies. And they had like a little dinner dance. And there was a black man sitting at a table there. And he came over and asked me to dance.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very young, and so I looked at my father and said yes. So I went and I danced with him. And I just want to know if it was all right to dance with a man, whether he was black or blue or green. It wasn't, didn't enter my consciousness. Then when we got married, moved to Oklahoma, I got off the train, and I see there's a sign, colored and white.
For the drinking fountain.
Water fountains. So what did I do? I walked over to the colored fountain. I didn't like this idea at all. So I'm drinking from the colored fountain, and this man walks up to me and he says, Missy, he says, I know what you think you're doing. He said, but you're going to make trouble for yourself. He said, don't do this. He says, take your drink of water. He says, or drink over there. He said, don't do this. He says, you can make trouble for the black people as well. He says, sometimes they don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
He says, don't do this. Well, I didn't want to get anybody else in trouble, so I walked away. But the world was a very strange world. I suppose it was the best of times, the worst of times. Very interesting world. It still is. But
Do you think that, either one of you, do you think that racism is just more quiet now, or do you think that it's gone away a lot, that it's diminished?
it's gone away tremendously.
Yeah.
Are you kidding
Yeah.
me?
Because of the government.
You look at a newspaper, you don't see signs, restricted, restricted, restricted. We want, my girlfriends and I wanted to go away for a summer vacation in Wisconsin, and we accepted it, because that's the way it's always been. Restricted, restricted. Oh, this looks nice. Ah, no, it's restricted. You can't go there. Restricted meant no Jews
Yeah.
or black people. In those days it was niggers.
Do either one of you have an instance that sticks out in your mind where someone showed prejudice against you because you were Jewish?
You have any?
You always thought I was Irish.
My brother used to get beaten up on the way home from school a lot because they called him the Jew boy. And he used to get beaten up. He'd come home bloody noses a lot. And I had gone to a movie, and there was a couple sitting in front of my friend Betty and I were sitting here. This couple was sitting here, husband and wife, obviously it turned out. And then there was another couple sitting in front of them. And the couple in front of them had their heads together. And then sometimes they'd straighten up. So this couple who was sitting behind them, were going like this. They're trying to see the movie.
Yeah.
And they were getting pretty upset. So by the time they got really upset, she said to him, those goddamn Jews, can't they keep their heads straight? So I tapped her on the shoulder. And I said, how do you know they're Jewish? I said, all you see is the back of their heads. She said, I know. And at that time, one of the boys that I knew and liked very much in school, I'd heard that morning that he died. In the newspaper, they had names. And I just couldn't take this, because I said, do you know that Jewish boys are dying for you? I says, and you don't even know that these people are Jewish and you're talking about them? She says, they're not dying for me. She says, none of them are in the army. Well, I tapped her on the shoulder again to tell her something else, and she turned around with her purse. And she gave me a swat across the side of my head. So and then she and her husband got up, because I guess they figured they better leave. Betty and I followed them, and they were leaving, so the wife was here and the husband was behind her, and the husband came in front of her because I moved a little faster than they did. And I said, "You stay right there because I'm going to kill her." He said, "No, leave her alone." I said, "I am going to kill her." Well, by that time, the movie theater was shut down. The movie was shut down.
Yeah.
And I heard the guy yelling, "The police are on their way." So Betty and I left.
Oh my gosh. I would have hit her.
Another time, well, I tried to, but her husband kept on. Another time, my girlfriend Betty and Esther and I went to the movies, and Betty had a very long nose, and Esther had a little button nose, and my nose was average. We were walking, these two boys were sitting there, they were commenting, "She's Jewish, she's not Jewish, she's Jewish." So I went over to him, I said, "What's the difference to you?" He says, "Well, if you're Jewish, you got a big nose." I started to choke him. I almost killed him. Betty pulled me away, and the boy and his friend pulled me away. Those were very emotional times. My Jewish friends and family, and cousins and boyfriends were dying. And here, because of the nose, and it wasn't Jewish, it was, Jewish with a hatred.
Yeah.
I didn't take that. Anyway, yes,
Amazing.
and there were a lot of other situations, but too numerous to mention.
Let's see. Just kind of like a question after all that heavy stuff. Think of like any of your favorite movies that really.
I know which one is his.
The Dawn Patrol.
The Dawn Patrol. Oh, that's the fighter plane.
With the white scarves flying off into the wild and beyond.
That's your favorite movie.
It's the only one I ever bought. I got it right on my shelf.
And Jackie Mason.
Oops, you can stop it. That's
So, other than that, I never really.
Didn't you say you had a problem with credit cards or something like that?
Well, other than that, I never really noticed anything until I went one day when I was earning some pretty good money already, and credit cards were becoming more popular. So I went to Sears to buy something. They had a special sale for people who could sign up for credit cards. They gave it another 10% discount. I said, "Great, let me sign up for it." She looked at my form. She said, "Well, you'll have to take this home and have your husband fill it out or sign it." I said, "What's that got to do with it?" I said, "I'm taking out the card. We're very sorry, but the man of the house has to do this, and you have to be the spouse and sign where the spouse is." I said, "Let me tell you something. I'm earning more money than he is." I said, "So what are you telling me, that his credit is better than mine?" I was furious. There's nothing I could do. Nothing I could do. And if a woman was divorced,
Yeah.
or not married,
Yeah.
she was in major trouble.
major trouble.
And then the other thing was, I didn't drive at that time. And if you didn't have a driver's license, forget it. And many women in those days did not have driver's license, so they excluded us every way they could.
You know the lawyer for Roe versus Wade, Sarah Weddington, she changed that law, the equal credit law.
Oh, lots of laws were changed, and boy, I'm all for it. There was a lot of inequality, and I think it has improved tremendously. You didn't see many lawyers. In fact, while I was at Inland, I used to quell.
Yeah.
These girls would come in, and they were electricians, and they used to go on top of roofs, and they were roofers.
Yeah.
And suddenly we were seeing more and more of these girls coming in. First, they came into the construction as just as flag girls,
Yeah.
And then pretty soon they needed somebody to drive the truck. Hey, I can drive that truck. All right,
Yeah.
come on. Pretty soon they were driving the trucks. Pretty soon they were actually in the union.
Yeah.
So now I think that
I had a construction job last summer.
I think that it has come around, not fully,
Yeah.
but just like with the black people, it has come so far from white, bathrooms and white drinking fountains and black, not black colored.
Yeah.
Oh, so much better. I know there's got a long way to go,
Yeah.
but I remember when it was nowhere, and now it has really, And schools used to have quotas, Jewish quotas,
Uh-huh.
and black quotas. Some of them still do, I understand. But the University of Chicago had a Jewish quota. There were too many Jewish people coming in.
Uh-huh.
It was just not good.
Yeah.
But
And now you have Papa making dinner for you.
a lot of people have. Well, the whole male-female thing has changed. The whole world has changed.
Yeah.
A lot of it for the better.
Uh-huh.
Some of it, I'd say most of it for the better. I'm very thrilled with the world, and I just hope that people learn to respect each other. That's all. That's all. And I don't think it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's this road rage. No respect for people.
Uh-huh.
I tell you, my mother called his mother, Mrs. Mancock. And his mother used to call my mother for 25 years, Mrs. Simon, or Machatenist. So much, and you guys say, call her Rose, call her Sarah. It's this shame, it's not nice. Gotta respect. So respect was really hammered into us.
Is that something that you instilled in your children?
Let's put it this way. I read Dr. Spock.
Mm-hmm.
I was very determined, as I've said, to be an all-American person. I had no one to show me. My mother and I were not friends.
Yeah.
She was my mother. My Yiddish mama. And she didn't know about periods. She didn't know what to tell me about things. I had to go. She took me down to a neighbor to tell me about that.
Did you have a neighbor to tell you about that?
Yeah, a girl, Caroline Dembo. Her mother was a teacher, and so she took me downstairs. And my mother talked to her mother, and Caroline told me what was happening to me. I thought I was bleeding to death. But my mother didn't understand it either. She didn't know what was happening. She knew it happened, but she didn't know why. She couldn't explain it to me.
Yeah.
And I was not my mother's friend. I was her daughter, a tochter.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother was a son. And this was my mother, and this was my father. And if we did something wrong, my father would take out the strap, and he'd give us a punch and took us with the strap.
Yeah, that was the thing with the strap.
And your father did the same thing, I'm sure.
He never caught me. I was too fast.
And one time I tried to
I would
spank
blame
Kurt.
my brother anyway. He did.
Kurt will tell you a story about how I tried to spank him. He put a book in his pants,
Oh,
and I gave him a
yes,
punch
yeah.
and took us, and I got such a sore hand that we both started to laugh. But I raised your mother and Kurt according to Dr. Spock, and he said, you be the parent, you're not a friend.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to get respect from them is not, you can't be their equal. You are not their equal. They live in a different world than you do. You have to maintain that little distance which will enable you to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I raised my children. I didn't raise them as my friend like your mother's raising you now.
Yeah.
My mother didn't raise me that way. I didn't raise my children that way. That was not the way it was done.
Uh-huh.
By the time your mother came around, she was reading different books already and seeing different things. It's a whole different world.
Do you have any regrets that you didn't?
Oh yes, I'm very regretful that I was not a friend.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know how. My parents were not my friends. How do you get to be a friend with a child?
Uh-huh.
They're a child, you know. You have to dress them, you have to take care of them, you have to feed them, you have to make sure they go with the right friends, you have to make sure they do their homework, you have to take them on a vacation, you have to play Monopoly with them.
Yeah.
And when they do something wrong, don't talk to me that way, I'm your mother. I'm
Yeah.
not your friend. I'm your mother. I used to tell them, I'm not your friend, because that's what Dr. Spock said.
Yeah.
I'm not your friend, I'm your mother.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure I have regrets, but they were never done out of, because everything that I did because I wanted to do it so right.
Yeah.
I used to sit and read Dr. Spock into the night, and I memorized it. And I think I had a volume when you kids were growing up.
Yeah.
Then I realized it's not the way things are done anymore.
What else did he say? What else was?
Well, I'll tell you, it was, you had to have a certain amount of space between you and your child. You could not let them into your space. Equally, you could not go into their space. There had to be a mutual respect,
Mm-hmm.
but not buddy-buddy.
Mhm.
And if your kids want to be your buddy, they're going to take advantage of you. Don't let them be your buddy.
Yeah.
So was that